When you walk through a forest, what do you really see? I mean, sure, there are trees, birds, maybe some insects buzzing around. It's easy to think it's just a random collection of stuff, but it's not. It's actually this super complex, interconnected system where every single piece has a job. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain and see how that system really works.
Okay, so take a look at this. At first glance, you see the obvious things, right? Trees, a deer, some mushrooms on a log. But what's really going on? Well, that deer, it's depending on those plants for its next meal. And those mushrooms, they're not just sitting there. They're breaking down that old log, sending all those good nutrients back into the soil for the trees to use. You see, every single part, living and not, is connected in this dynamic system we call an ecosystem.
And that's the official definition right there. An ecosystem. It's a term that was actually coined way back in 1935 by an English botanist, A.G. Tansley. And the key word here, the most important word, is interacting. It's all about that dance, that constant give and take between the living things and their physical world. That interaction, well, that's everything. So, to really get how this all works, we've got to meet the players. Let's start with the living parts, what scientists call the biotic components. This is basically the entire cast of characters in our big ecological story. And it turns out, every living thing in an ecosystem pretty much falls into one of three main jobs. You've got your producers, they make the food. You've got your consumers, they eat the food. And then you have the decomposers, who are kind of like the recycling crew for the whole operation. So, first up, let's talk about the producers. Honestly, these guys are the foundation of, well, everything. Think about plants, algae, any organism that can literally make its own food out of thin air and sunlight through photosynthesis. They're called autotrophs, which just means self-feeders. And let me tell you, without them, the whole system would just completely fall apart.
All right, so after the producers, we've got the consumers. These are the heterotrophs. They can't make their own food, so they've got to get their energy by eating other organisms. This group includes pretty much every animal you can possibly think of. Yeah, that includes us too.
But consumer isn't just one big group. It actually has levels. It all starts with the primary consumers. These are your herbivores, the plant eaters. Then they get eaten by secondary consumers, who, in turn, get eaten by tertiary consumers. And here's the really important part. With every single step you take up this chain, a ton of energy is lost. It just vanishes. That's why you have way fewer lions on the savanna than you have grass.
And last but definitely not least, we have the unsung heroes of the ecosystem, the decomposers. I'm talking about things like fungi and bacteria. They are the ultimate cleanup crew. They break down all the dead plants and animals, returning all those essential nutrients right back into the soil so the producers can use them all over again. They're the reason nothing ever truly goes to waste.
Okay, so we've met all the living characters, but they can't just exist in a void. They need a stage to perform on, and that stage is built from all the non-living parts of the environment, the abiotic components.
And these abiotic factors are the conditions that make life possible in the first place. You've got sunlight, which provides all the initial energy. You've got water, which is essential for, well, everybody. Then there's the air, the soil, the temperature. All of these non-living things create the very specific environment that decides who can live there and who can't.
All right, so we have our living players and our non-living stage. But the real magic of an ecosystem, the thing that makes it all work, is how they connect. And the most critical connection of all is the flow of energy and nutrients. That's what powers the whole show.
The simplest way to picture this is with a food chain. It's just a straight line showing who eats what. So energy from the sun gets soaked up by a plant. A grasshopper comes along and eats that plant, then a mouse eats the grasshopper, and finally, a snake eats the mouse. See? It's a direct transfer of energy, step by step.
But, of course, nature is almost never that simple, right? In the real world, all of those simple chains are tangled up together, forming what we call a food web. And this complexity is actually a good thing. It makes the whole system more stable. If one food source disappears, a predator has other options to fall back on. It gives the ecosystem resilience.
So when you put it all together, all these interactions are really doing four main jobs that keep the whole system running smoothly. You've got productivity, that's just creating life. You have energy flow, moving that life force up the food web. You have decomposition, breaking stuff down. And finally, nutrient cycling, which brings it all right back to the start. It's one big, continuous, beautiful loop.
So now that we've got the basic building blocks down, let's zoom out a little. Because the rules we've been talking about, they apply everywhere. but they create this incredible, mind-boggling variety of ecosystems all over our planet.
At the highest level, you can basically split all ecosystems into two giant categories. On one side, you have terrestrial ecosystems. That's everything on land, where things like soil and rain are the big deal. And on the other side, you have aquatic ecosystems. Everything in the water, where factors like salt content, depth, and sunlight define what can survive.
But get this, and this fact is just staggering. Aquatic ecosystems, everything from a tiny pond to the massive oceans, cover about 70% of our planet's surface. 70%! That makes them the largest type of ecosystem in the world, and it's not even close.
So let's take a super quick tour of the big land-based types. First up, forests. The defining thing here is that dense canopy of trees way up high. It creates all these different layers of habitat, which supports an absolutely incredible diversity of life and some really complex food webs.
Next, we have grasslands. Here, it's all about the grasses. They're the main producers, and they support these huge herds of grazing animals. These places are shaped by two really powerful forces: the constant munching of herbivores and fires that sweep through, clearing out old growth and sparking new life. Then you get to a place like the tundra. Now this is a harsh environment. It's cold, and there's a layer of permanently frozen soil right under the surface called permafrost. Life here has to be seriously tough, so it's mostly low-lying plants, mosses, and animals that are built for the extreme cold.
And finally, we've got the deserts. These are the driest places on Earth, all defined by a serious lack of water. The plants and animals that manage to live here have developed some of the most amazing adaptations you've ever seen just to survive the heat and save every single drop of water they can find.
So you see, from a single drop of water to a vast desert, ecosystems are absolutely everywhere, and each one is this delicate, intricate web of connections. And that brings us to one last really important thought. If these systems are such a delicate balance, what happens to the entire web when you pull on just one thread? What happens when you remove a single piece from the puzzle? That is something worth thinking about.